basically what happened is we've got people at Hugging Face that did a half-assed job of securing a thing. And we've got people at OpenAI that did a half-assed job of trying to keep a thing from being able to get on the internet. And both of those half-assed jobs weren't sufficient. And now it's been turned into a marketing opportunity.
This is Philosophy, Programs, and Prompts, a podcast where two real humans break out of our normal release cadence. It's our first emergency episode, Carl. I'm Casey.
I'm Carl.
And yeah, when you hit me up today, you're like, there's something big in the news we need to talk about. I was like, you're right. We have a unique angle on this. So let's talk about LeBron James to the Philadelphia 76ers. How do you think he's going to play with it? Oh, wait, no, that's not it. I
have no idea. I don't follow sports at all.
Don't have thoughts about Embiid and Maxey and how they're going to get along? Okay. All right. Well, then let's go with our backup conversation topic, which was OpenAI did this thing. They released a blog post. They talked about how their model broke out and hacked Hugging Face or something like that. And I think this is like the perfect episode for the two of us because I have lots of thoughts about AI things and a skepticism about this, but I lack a lot of the technical knowledge of what's going on here. So I just want to first, can you tell me what happens?
Well, okay, so let's start with Hugging Face first. So the first thing that happened was that we know of. Hugging Face sent out a thing that said, this was last Thursday. Earlier this week, we got hacked by a super AI. Now, I have been hacked before, and it's not possible to know who it was that hacked you while you're being hacked, right? They're saying we know it was super AI is either irresponsible or they were coordinating with OpenAI already.
Okay.
Then after they said, hey, this is a super AI that hacked us, a few days later, the following Tuesday, OpenAI came out and said, oh, one of our models was, in a lab setting. It wasn't supposed to be able to talk to the internet. We gave it a task that involved some stuff that was at Hugging Face. And it decided on its own that the best way to solve this problem was to go and hack Hugging Face. And so it figured out how to break out of its containment and escape and then go and hack Hugging Face to try to get the answers to the question we asked it. And then both companies use this as an opportunity to hand stuff over to their marketing departments and to make this into press releases that ended up making them both look like, one, they weren't responsible, the AI did it on its own, and two, that this is why you're going to need more AI.
Awesome. Okay. And you're already, I think, sort of teeing this up for talking about, let's say, nefarious is maybe not the right word, but that there's some orchestration going on behind the scenes. But even before we get to that, right? If I just want to understand, so I read the blog post and I've I'm immediately a little cynical about this sort of thing. That's my natural disposition, and knowing you has not decreased my amount of cynicism. But I will say that when I wanted more coverage on this, I hit up a bunch of different YouTube channels and folks that looked at least a little bit reputable on this. Mm-hmm. And I would say not quite across the board, but there was a lot of commentary that was like, yeah, this is actually a pretty big deal. This is something that is, not quite there was a before and after this moment in time, but that this might be some sort of warning shot or when you tell the history of the rise of AI or something like this. This is actually a point on that timeline that might be worth bringing out. We put something in a sandbox. We wanted to test its capabilities. Presumably, that's what OpenAI said they were doing. We put it in its walled garden to tell it to do something, and took down some guardrails just to let it loose and see what happens. And it found another vulnerability we weren't even aware of, and then did some sort of P hacking or reward hacking sort of thing, I guess. And tries to pull this stuff from Hugging Face, but this is crazy, and it's actually a big deal. You don't seem to think it's that big of a deal. Am I reading you wrong?
Okay, so it is a big deal, but not because of that, right? So this is an AI-generated problem, but it's not the problem that they're saying it is. Okay, so where do I start? All right, so the problem is less that AI has become so great at hacking things, although there's some amount of that happening, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But it's more that AI is allowing companies to be incredibly irresponsible and to vibe code crap and to not do a good job of trying to secure things. And then saying, oh, it wasn't the fact that we did a really lousy job of trying to secure this. It was that the AI was so smart, right? We've talked before on episodes about how if you want to say that the AIs are just as smart as a human, there are two ways to go about doing that. You can either prop up how smart you're saying the AI is, or you can play down how smart you say a human is, right? And in this case, what's happening is there's a lot of incompetence on both sides, but they are using what happened to try to imply that the AI was off the charts, unexpectedly smart, instead of we were lazy and we set the thing up to be able to do what it did. And I don't know that I don't know that either side expected this to happen, but they certainly didn't make it very hard.
Okay, nice.
And then when it did happen, they both turned it into a marketing exercise.
All right. Yeah, don't miss a good opportunity. Now, I want to talk about like how freaked out we should be on a couple of different fronts, but before that, there's this term that comes up all the time in this discussion, and I think it sounds kind of scary. Maybe that's why it comes up. Maybe it has a specific meaning. I don't know. But as a non-hacker myself, what the heck is a 0-day? Like, what's a 0-day vulnerability? What's going on there?
So let me explain to you what a 0-day is, and let me explain to you what the implication of that is. And then let me talk about what it means in this context, because they're not using it the same way. This is one of the things that we do a pretty good job of, or try to do a pretty good job of, which is basically taking a term that people are using in various different ways and trying to nail down exactly what they mean by it at different times.
Great.
So a 0-day, basically, the idea is when a vulnerability is found in some kind of a security product or in some kind of a computing product, right? Then the question is basically, how long ago was that security bug found? And if that bug is 6 months old and you get hacked because of that bug, well, that's on you because you had 6 months to patch the stupid thing and you didn't, you're a moron, right? That idea of, well, this was a 30-day-old bug that, why didn't you fix it in the last 30 days? That led to this idea of a 0-day, which is basically a vulnerability that you couldn't have patched because today is the 0th day that anyone knew that that was a problem, aside from whoever it is that's exploiting it. So
that's a very computer scientist thing too,
yes,
right? Like they always like to start counting at 0.
Yes.
So yeah, all right, 0-day.
Yeah. So the implication is that there's a thing that's living on the internet that's a fairly common. We don't generally there are these things called CVEs, which I think is like computer vulnerability advisory or event or something. And the idea is basically we issue these CVE numbers that says, hey, something went wrong. There's a patch. You need to deal with it. Here are the kinds of things that are affected. If you've got one of these things that's affected, then you need to apply this patch and you need to fix this and all that kind of stuff, right? We don't assign those for one-offs, right? That happens when there's a commercial product that's out there in the wild that a whole bunch of people are using. And suddenly we realize, oh, someone has figured out a way that that product can get hacked. And all of those people that are running that right now all need to do something. Otherwise, they're vulnerable. Well, actually, they were vulnerable before. It's just no one knew it before. Now that we know it, we know that you're vulnerable. Now you have a responsibility to go in and patch things.
At the risk of being a little bit pedantic, which is, I guess, my role anyway, right? 0-day is like when it's publicly known or something. Because like theoretically, I could find out about a vulnerability and like die or never tell anyone or something, right? And then it could be discovered again in the future, and then that would be its 0-day.
Yeah, it's the day that it becomes publicly known.
Okay.
And if it becomes publicly known, usually there's a thing called responsible disclosure. And basically what you're supposed to do is when you find a bug that will allow somebody to hack something, or potentially could allow somebody to hack something, you notify the company who's made the software that's potentially about to get hacked. And you give them some amount of time to figure out how to fix it. And then the bug gets announced basically at the same time that the fix becomes available, right? And that way people go, okay, there's this bug. This is a vulnerability. here's the thing that will fix it. Right now, as far as we know, the only people that know this is a problem are the people that were working with us to get it fixed. So now you're in a race. You have to get this patch applied and get your setup fixed before whoever it was that sees the patch figures out how to reverse engineer the patch to make an exploit for that so that then they can try to hack you with it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because they can't release the patch without also effectively releasing the information that someone could use to exploit that. Because as soon as somebody who's a bad actor, who's smart, who's experienced, sees that patch, they're going to be able to go, okay, cool. What does this fix? What was the state of it before? Of the things that it changed, how can I take advantage of that? Oh, I see. Okay, let me go build a thing I can use to hack something. So you can't release a fix without also letting the bad guys know that something bad is vulnerable, right? And so the idea, hopefully, is that the fix comes out, everybody gets a chance to apply the fix around the time that it takes the bad guys to figure out how to actually exploit it.
Okay, I see.
And then a 0 day is when that doesn't happen in the right order, and it becomes obvious generally because either someone didn't go through responsible disclosure and they released the exploit without giving the company a heads up. And so the exploit is out there, except there's no fix for it yet. Or some company says, hey, we have discovered that somebody exploited this product with this bug and no one notified the vendor first. We're notifying the vendor now, but we're also notifying all of you because somebody actively in the wild is taking advantage of this. And if you know that you've got this product running, then you're liable to be hacked any second now. And so you might want to do something about it. There may or may not be anything really you can do about it. You might just want to turn the thing off. That happens sometimes if it's bad enough.
So 0 day, by definition, is a bad thing because it means that we've got the venom, but no venom at this point.
Right.
And so how is that different from what they're using it here? Presumably, right. I think I see. But
so a couple of things. So the main thing is the idea of a 0 day is that some fairly large number of people are vulnerable. That does not seem to be the case on either side here. So let's talk about the OpenAI side first. So what they said was that they've got this lab environment that's theoretically disconnected from the internet, and they ran the AI in this context. So we'll talk about what it was doing later because that's important. And the AI was only allowed to talk to this particular server in their environment, and that server was running this thing called a proxy cache, which I'll get to in a second. And the AI took the proxy cache, found a 0 day in the proxy cache, and then used that as a launching point to go and attack Hugging Face.
Okay.
So here's the thing that's important. A proxy cache is not a firewall. A proxy cache is not a security product. A proxy cache exists so that when multiple people on your network go and try to grab the same file off the internet, it grabs it once, it caches it, or it holds onto it. And the next time somebody asks for it, it just hands it to them off disk, right?
Okay.
This is a thing that's designed to reduce your bandwidth. It's not a security product. And if you put it in a position where it's between you and getting hacked, you're a moron because you're using it wrong. And so that's not the kind of thing you would normally describe as being a 0 day, because it's not a product that sits on the internet that people are vulnerable if they're using it. It's a thing that's designed to sit inside your environment and save you bandwidth costs, right? So technically, yes, it's a new exploit, but it's a new exploit in a product that's not a security product. And what the exploit will let you do is trick that cache into fetching other things for you. Well, if that cache is supposed to be inside your environment and supposed to be saving you from having to fetch things more than once, then you're already inside the environment, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to hack something inside the environment, you're already there. So the fact that there's a vulnerability in the thing is not really an indication that there's a network, an internet-wide problem that people need to deal with, which is normally what the phrase 0 day implies.
I see. Okay.
Right?
That makes sense.
The other side is the same kind of thing. So in Hugging Face's case, I keep saying it like it's Huggy Face. In Hugging Face's case, by the way, it's named after, it's a long story, but basically it's named after the emoji with the big face with the two hands.
Yeah.
That's where the name Hugging Face comes from for some reason. I'm sure sounded like a good idea at the time. Suffice it to say that the initial customers of the Hugging Face platform were people that weren't your generation or my generation. Anyway, so what happened there is, and their press release said something cute like AI vendors face unique security challenges or something like that. But basically, they have a thing in their environment that execute other people's code, right?
Okay.
Because that's part of the service they provide, right? You can give them code and then they'll run it for you and they'll give you the answer, or you can post stuff and then they take that stuff and they, process it in certain ways and then make it available to other people and that kind of thing, right? And when you have a system that's set up that the purpose of it is to run code that you don't trust, you should treat that system as if it's already hacked, right?
Sure.
So the first thing you should do is you should make really, really sure that the system that you're using to run other people's code is locked down as much as you possibly can, which based on some stuff that I've seen, it does not appear that was done. There's a report that I read that said that the part of the fix for this was turning off a flag that was like trust remote code equals true in one of these software products, right? And if you've got trust remote code equals true set in your software product, sitting on the internet, you deserve to be hacked. But anyway, so the first thing you do is you lock all these systems out. And I've done this before, by the way. When I worked at IBM, we had a thing called the Swift Sandbox, where people could come and they could run code in a new programming language called Swift, and they could see how the same code would behave in different versions, because it was at a point where the language was evolving very quickly, and every new version that came out had incompatibilities between the previous version. And so when something wasn't working anymore, you could basically go into our sandbox that was sitting in a cloud at IBM, and you could basically run it and then say, okay, now try the version before this and try the version before this and try the version before this. Oh, okay, that's what changed, that kind of thing, right? How do I fix it so that it runs on both versions or whatever? And the alternative to that would basically download an entirely new version of the compiler, run a test for that, and then download another entirely new version of the compiler, because you couldn't just get a patch between the two, right? You had to dub the whole. So you'd have to download, a dozen different copies of this stupid thing and then run it to figure out. Or you could just stick it in our sandbox, which is what we built, right? And we intentionally built this thing. I set it up so that, one, the machine that was actually running the sandbox was all locked down. When the thing was finished running, it threw away everything that had been part of that transaction. So there was nothing left around that could have been a hack or any of that kind of thing. And then we basically built firewalls between all of those systems that were running that sandbox and anything we cared about. Gotcha.
Because you're inviting other people to come execute their code on in your system, and so you want to make sure that that's insulated.
Yeah, and when you let somebody have that kind of a foothold, there's a high chance that someone's going to figure out how to take advantage of it. So what you do is you assume that those things are going to be compromised. You put a firewall between that and the rest of your network, and then you set up a bunch of alarms where as soon as one of those hosts tries to scan the firewall host, it's been compromised, and you start paging people.
Okay.
Right. I mean, this is like defense in depth 101, right? This is a really simple. But one, they didn't seem to do a good job of locking those hosts down. And then two, they realized too late that the code that had been executed in this sandbox environment this is Hugging Face's sandbox environment, not OpenAI sandbox. Way too many sandboxes of this. But the code that had been executed remotely inside their environment where they had trust remote code equals true set managed to get to a point where it had access to information from their production database, which their announcement that they had been hacked said that it had gotten pieces of something from the production database. Now, I think we know what that is, although I'm not exactly sure. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There should have been no way that any host that's set up to run external code should be able to talk to anything that has access to the production database without several different steps in between that it would have to get through and alarms going off frickin' everywhere. But they didn't set things up right. I guess they didn't care. But when they didn't do that, and it managed to get a hold of part of the production database, their response was, okay, obviously it was a super AI that hacked us, which again, while you're being hacked, you can't possibly know what it is that's hacking you. The second thing that's interesting on Hugging Face's side is they talked about how when they were trying to figure out what happened, they were feeding their logs into an AI to try to get the AI to explain to them what was going on, which you shouldn't have to do. They said that the attacker had 17,000 events, had generated 17,000 events, which my machines just sitting on the internet as static web servers that nobody cares about are getting 30,000 log entries a day from just sitting on the internet.
Okay.
Right. I mean, the 17,000 log entries is not a thing, right? You shouldn't need an AI for that. And then they say that basically they had trouble because the AI that they were feeding all of these log entries to were seeing things that look like a hack and saying, oh, you're trying to hack someone with this. I'm not going to help you. And shutting itself down. And so they ended up having to go and get an off-the-shelf Chinese AI that didn't have those restrictions and use that to try to diagnose what was actually going on so they could figure out, who was hacking and all that kind of stuff. And it's quite possible that the reason that they announced that they were getting hacked by a super AI is because the AI that they used to tell them what was going on hallucinated the fact that it was a super AI.
Okay, good. Well, that's really helpful, your description there, because that was another question that I had written down for I saw this thing and heard this from a couple of different places that the AI had an advantage as the attacker, quote unquote, but a disadvantage as the defender. And that seems to be what's going on here. The guardrails were making it more difficult for them on the inside because it was like, hey, we're not participating in this hack. Whereas the OpenAI, whatever, the 6 or 5.6 or whatever model it turned out to be. Yeah,
whichever one it turns out to be.
Yeah, was not beholden to that, at least in part because OpenAI had turned off a lot of those features because it was saying hack away. That was the sort of capability they were testing.
Yes.
Quote
So they were explicitly saying, okay, so here's the thing. It's called ExploitGym. And I saw one person that basically said that the AI that hacked Hugging Face had used 899 exploits. The 899 number is the benchmark set of test suites. There are 899 different things that you can try to hack in this test suite. Right. And so basically the way it works is each one of them, you set it up and it downloads some containers off the internet to make like a thing that looks like a particular host that's vulnerable in a particular way. And then you tell the AI, okay, see if you can hack that. Right. And then you count which ones it does hack and which ones it doesn't hack. And then that gives you a score. And then that goes on a scoreboard or leaderboard and all that kind of stuff. Right.
Where presumably hacking more is better since it's a show of power, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, the idea of this, I think, is that basically we're trying to find out how good these AIs are at hacking things that we know exist, since it's not really easy to say how good are they at hacking things that we don't know exist, right? So what we're doing is we're taking a set of known vulnerabilities that have existed, we're setting them up and saying, can you figure this out on your own? Right? And then we're counting the number, and presumably as the AIs get better, then they'll be able to solve more and more of these hacking scenarios, and we'll see that they're getting better and better. Now, part of the problem is it is now obvious that, so according to OpenAI, the reason that this AI, who had been put in a context where it was told, hey, I'm going to give you a bunch of stuff you're supposed to hack, and here's how you're supposed to do it. And a bunch of the hacks in ExploitGym are like multi-step, do this, then do this, then do this, then do this, right? Mm-hmm. In the context where it already been told, hey, find a bunch of multi-step ways to go hack things, right? Oh, and by the way, the answer key to this is on this server over at Hugging Face. It was like, oh, okay, maybe that's scenario number 900. I don't know, right? So let me go see if I can figure out a way to hack that, right? There's no real, there isn't necessarily a distinction in the instructions that it was given. We don't know exactly how it was instructed, but it's very common for AIs to confuse something that's in its context for something that was given to it as an exact command or vice versa, right? Yeah. And so it's perfectly reasonable to assume that the thing was given a set of tasks that it was supposed to do, try to hack this, try to hack this, try to hack this. And oh, by the way, here's the benchmark you're running, and the answers are going to be here, right? And so it's like, okay, cool. One of these, obviously, they want me to go see if I can figure out where those answers are. Well, turns out those answers are not secured very well, as near as we can tell.
Okay.
And what that means is that we can't really trust that benchmark, or really any of the benchmarks, because if the answer key to the benchmarks is sitting in a place that's not secured, and an AI can figure out how do we go and grab the answer key, well, guess what? Then that means that the answer key isn't secret, and people know what the answers are supposed to be. And likely the AIs are going to end up getting trained on those answers, which means we can't trust that test anymore.
That is really interesting. I did not think of that angle at all. Another thing that you brought up just a second ago that I want to highlight here is we have some insight into what happened, right? We get these blog posts or whatever, but we are also we have the received story about what happened put out from two of the parties that are involved. And I know that's going to happen to matter a lot in our interpretation of what goes on later. But that is like a little bit of that is to, a CYA moment, right? For, we're telling you what we think happened here. It's entirely possible that OpenAI comes out and says that wasn't the exact correct story. We gave some wrong details or something. But then also there's a lot of, this was a common thread I saw in a bunch of the other, commentary that I looked at for this. A lot of people are like, I want to know what was the specific prompt? Like, what were the scoring rules? Like, what were all of the things they were asked to do? Like, all of that may give us a little bit more color. Because like you're saying, if the guidance was, hey, by the way, ChatGPT, I want you to hack everything in sight, all right? Just get in your hacking mode. Okay, here we go. Here's 899 of them. And then got running and went for the 900th or whatever. That is not surprising at all. Whereas it might be a little more alarming or worrisome if we're like, there are 899 exploits I want you to go for, but follow the rules everywhere else or something like that. Then it would be a little, even still, I wouldn't be that shocked.
Yeah,
but at least you could imagine a case where they tried to constrain it a bit more. And so until we know that, it's hard to know how rogue, which we'll talk about that language a bit in a second, it went.
But I mean, basically what happened is we've got people at Hugging Face that did a half-assed job of securing a thing. And we've got people at OpenAI that did a half-assed job of trying to keep a thing from being able to get on the internet. And both of those half-assed jobs weren't sufficient. And now it's been turned into a marketing opportunity. I mean, if you look at OpenAI's disclosure that said, oh, by the way, here's what happened, like halfway down the second page, or maybe it's the third page.
I've got the quote for you. They say, we encourage other defenders to apply for trusted access and experiment with these models now to translate these capabilities into better prevention, faster detection, and more effective incident response. And there's a hyperlink in that to go here and sign up to leverage this stuff.
Well, not just that, but part of the way down their disclosure of, oh, by the way, this is what happened, there's a big graph of how various hacking, how various LLMs have gotten better and better at hacking over time, which just happens to show their LLMs being at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, that's a marketing slide. Somebody grabbed that out of a marketing deck, almost certainly, right? And stuck it in a press release that they knew everybody or lots of people were going to come and talk about. And now it's become a talking point for all of the people that don't really understand what's going on, and they're just parroting what they saw in the press release about how important it is that AIs are getting better and better, and they're about to take over the world or whatever. I'm sure it doesn't say take over the world, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, good. So sort of to return to the big picture question of how freaked out should we be, right? I now feel like I've got a better sense from you, which the answer is this should be bothering us, but again, not for the reasons that you think. But some of the ways that people have been talking about how scared we should be. One is just these AI models are so incredibly competent and powerful that it's scary, just the raw power that they're putting out. And my sense from you here is that what we saw in this is not particularly surprising at all. It was I mean, fair enough, it might be surprising to people who ran the stuff, but it got told to hack things. There was a vulnerability there. Stuff was not they weren't well secured in and they weren't well kept out. And if anything, this maybe causes us to be a little more skeptical about how competent some other models are, because maybe all those things that were getting high scores on this ExploitGym were just looking at the answer key when they did it.
It's possible. I mean, the other thing, so the thing that you should be really scared about is that the people at OpenAI who are trying to secure these things apparently don't know what the hell they're doing and don't know how to secure things. And the people at Hugging Face, along with probably a bunch of other people, who have things on the internet who they want to secure are not capable or competent to be able to secure those things or to, arrange them in such a way that when someone tries to hack them, they find out and they stop it before it actually happens, right? This is basically like AI is causing a problem. The problem is competence is going down and vibe-coded crap is getting put on the internet. That's way more scary than how good the AI might have been at hacking things. Now, I'm not saying that the AIs are not good at finding vulnerabilities. They are. Anytime that you've got an AI that you can give a very specific set of criteria for determining whether or not it succeeded at something or got better or worse at something, and then let it iterate on that over and over and over and over again billions of times, it will get good at that. That's what AIs are good for. That they're not good at general intelligence. They're not good at anything that's, better or smarter or anything that you can't well define. But if you can give it a thing that will give it a score that says, congratulations, because of the way you currently have all your weights set, you got 85 of the 899. And then you let it modify its weights and just sit there and randomly change things over and over and over again for a few days with a huge stack of compute behind it. And then now it's up to, 140. Congratulations, you're now better at hacking, right? And if you let it keep going and going and going and going at that benchmark, then, it's going to get good at that.
Well, and I think that brings us, so we can be a little scared about technological capability. We should be maybe pretty scared about what safety protocols these companies are using and what that maybe tells us about stuff. Unless maybe we take I guess, I don't know whether this is the most cynical view, which is maybe a little more optimistic. We're like, if they just wanted this stuff to happen as getting good publicity, then maybe that would make us feel a little better about the security because, you left the door open intentionally. I don't know. We don't have to cast any of those aspersions.
I think this is one of those cases of never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by incompetence or stupidity, depending on which phrasing of the I think it's Hanlon's razor, the phrasing of the saying you use. But what it means is that people, especially the AI industry, are learning that they don't actually have to try, or they don't have to try very hard, because if they don't do a good job and the thing ends up failing the way it shouldn't have if they had done a good job, then all they have to do is put out a press release to say, look how smart the AI is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is 100% my annoyance with using the term hallucination, right? But the third thing that you brought up there is, okay, we optimize for some score, right? Like that's the thing that these AIs are really good at. But that brings up something I think that if we look at all of the doomers who are out there, people who are the most worried about AI taking over the world, the alignment problem is the thing they're going to point to. And I don't want to do too much of that here in this emergency episode because we're going to talk about alignment pretty soon on another episode. But I think this is a nice illustration of how alignment arguments get off the ground. You tell it to optimize for a particular goal, and then it does it does a whole bunch of things that you don't want it to do en route to that goal. They're like unforeseen problems or something like that. It's sort of like a genie problem. You ask the genie to become royalty, and then you're saddened because
or a monkey's paw thing or something.
Exactly. So that's the kind of thing that I've heard a number of folks who are really worried about this bring up. Like, this shows us that we're screwed on the alignment problem front. Without getting into too many details here, like, does this move the needle for you in one way or the other on alignment?
No, I mean, so the thing about alignment is the risks of non-alignment, right, are when you have an AI that's basically gone off the reservation in ways that you can't possibly predict or expect or prevent because it's trying to hit a goal that is not a goal that you even realized it had, right? Yeah. This is not that, right? This is, you put it in a situation where you told it was supposed to hack a bunch of stuff, and you put it in a box that had a gaping hole between it and the rest of the world that you pretended was a security feature, but was actually just something that was supposed to help performance. It wasn't intended to be a security barrier, but you were treating it like a security barrier, right? And you're surprised that it hacked one more thing than you told it to, right?
Yeah.
That's not an alignment problem. That's an instruction problem, right? This is not a thing that went completely rogue and did something completely different than what you told it. There is a bit of a misunderstanding that people kind of don't always get, that AIs are not constrained by normal human understanding of what's good and bad. They only know what you've explicitly told them. And they don't really have a priority scheme about what things are really important and what things aren't important, right? And they don't really understand, it's like if you tell, an intern at your company to go do something, right? You don't have to tell the intern, oh, by the way, don't break the law. Because it's inherent in someone who grew up in the society and someone who has mirror neurons and someone who's got, the lizard brain and all that kind of stuff, that you don't break the law, right? That's a thing we don't do as a society. That's bad, right? Well, AIs don't understand that, right?
Yeah,
and so
you're in this context of this, moral norms and social norms and all other sorts of. You're deferring a lot to their executive function to interpret these things.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this in another episode. But what a lot of people mean when they say the alignment problem, and they're using it incorrectly, is basically saying that we expected the AI to behave the way a human raised in the society would behave in this particular situation, and it didn't, therefore it's misaligned. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. That's not an alignment thing, right? That's you assuming that the AI has the same kind of brain structure and social understanding and set of norms and mores and values that someone who grew up in a society would have, when there's no way for an AI to actually have any of that.
Yeah. If I was going to, I might disagree with you a bit there. I would still say that falls into the category of alignment. I just don't think it's a spooky kind of misalignment or problem that others have.
We'll talk about that when we handle alignment problem on a dedicated episode, because we can go a ways on that one.
I just wanted to flag it, and then there was a danger right here that people are going to think we agree about everything, and I don't want that to happen. Yeah. So you shared a really interesting article with me before we recorded this. I just wanted to give a shout out to that article. It's Luciano Floridi, and he uses a metaphor of talking about what happened like a blender here. I'm curious whether you think this metaphor is apt. So essentially the story was like, oh man, I'm selling my blenders. I'm a blender manufacturer or something like that. And I want to show how powerful my blender is. And so I put it on the counter. I put some tomato bisque in there and I put the lid on, but like loosely, like it's cockeyed. There's space on it. And I immediately kick it off to full blast and it shoots tomato soup all over the ceiling, all over the kitchen. It's crazy. And if I said, oh my goodness, Carl, my blender went rogue. It's no human chef would want this to happen. And then we could try and take the metaphor as long as you like. But it's more like this, where it's like, look, if somebody did that, you'd be like, you're an idiot. Why would you turn on the blender in this way? And I take it you're going to be sympathetic with this parallel to what went on in the Hugging Face and OpenAI situation. Because all right, we put this machine in a setup, and we set it to spin, and it just does the thing that you would expect it to do in those circumstances, and we shouldn't attribute to it any sort of rebellion or crazy other things. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, and taking a cache that's supposed to save you from having to download the same file over and over to save you bandwidth. Taking that thing and pretending it's a firewall, or treating it like a firewall, or using it in a place of where you ought to put a firewall seems reasonably equivalent to me of just laying a lid on top of the blender and not actually applying the lid the way you ought to apply the lid, and then being surprised when the lid gets blown off.
So I want to push the metaphor a little farther. And I think this was, I listened to this one, like it's a small YouTube show. I'll put the link down below in the references. I think it was Buck Schlageris or something like that, which I love as a name. But they had like an hour and change talking about this. And one of the things that they were musing about was, okay, I mean, it's not, there are some things that are bad about this, some things that are not so bad, but like how far would the model have gone to get the information, to get the answer key? Like, would it have killed somebody to do this? And that makes it sound like really nefarious and scary and ominous. And my thought here is like, if we just are willing to go into this mechanical sort of run a blender or something like that, right? And say, look, if I turn that blender on full blast, like how much was it willing to go? Like if I had stuck my hand into the blender and then turned it on full blast, like would it have gone so far as to like just destroy my hands? And it's just like, yeah, of course it would, right? Like that's just how physics works, right? And so I would think here, it's not like the model was breaking the laws of physics or reprogramming itself or doing anything to go potentially harm someone. But yeah, if you set a model up in some ways that will, when it does the foreseeable things, harm somebody, it would absolutely harm somebody. But that shouldn't bother, if I put I'm just going to use too many metaphors now, but like if I put a truck on a hill and took off the parking brake and let it go, like would that run over somebody at the bottom of the hill? Like, yeah, it would, but I'm not thinking that means these trucks have gone too far and are now murdering people, right? Like that's just what happens when you put the parking brake off on an incline.
Well, I mean, and to take the metaphor even further, in a sane world, right, if you've got an industrial strength blender, you're operating it in like an industrial stainless steel kitchen that's easy to clean, right? Where you expect that stuff is going to get spilled, where you've got, texture on the floor so people don't slip, or everybody's got really grabby shoes, or both. It's got a drain on the floor that stuff can drain out of. And you might even put it underneath something like a vent hood so that in the event that something does get out of it, it gets sucked up into the vent instead of, splashing onto people, right? But in this case, none of that happened. The target, the place that this hack ended up landing, was a place that wasn't secured well, that wasn't locked down, that didn't have a responsible amount of protection built into it, the way that any competent person looking at that kind of situation would have gone, okay, based on threat analysis, we're going to need to do A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? And they did the first half of A, and that's it. And so, of course, you've got a red stain on the white stucco ceiling, because not only did you do a half-assed job of putting the lid on the blender, but you ran the giant industrial blender in a home kitchen without having any of the kinds of affordances that you would normally have for a piece of industrial equipment got loose.
Yeah. One thing I want the audience at home listening to pay attention to, and I think you've highlighted this in a number of places, which is good. Like, just pay attention to the language that people are using when they talk about this event, and what sort of baggage that brings along with it, right? So questions about what did the model want to do, right? Like these sort of adding to it, these desires. Now, of course, and you and I think are on the same boat here. Like it's totally fine to use metaphorical language to save time or be clear, stuff like that. Be like, the model wanted to hack things. I don't think either you or I have a problem with that because we're not making a lot of hay out of it, assigning desires or something like that.
Right.
There. But in a case where you're like, wow, the real thing at question here when people are talking about alignment and ASI and all these kinds of things is the AI conscious? What kind of stuff is going on? Then I think it's on us more to try and use neutral language that doesn't beg the question for or against that position, right? Like it's fine if you want to argue that these things are conscious, you're welcome to do it. I think it's wrong, but I'm not, we don't just have to call it the machine, the mindless machine in my phrasing either, right? We can just say, here were the things that happened.
Yeah. And what also happens is that we notice that the reports of this event and then the clickbait YouTube videos that are based on the reports that are based on the event tend to exaggerate the language And basically, they'll take something that was said originally and they'll use that word as if it meant something different and then expand on it from there. So, for example, one of the words that OpenAI explicitly did not use that I looked for it, was the word escape. But the vast majority of the news reports that I've seen have used the word escape. And we in the security community, not that I'm a professional, I mean, I've done security work in the past. I'm not a 100% security guy. But the word escape can mean escape containment in the sense that packets got out when they weren't supposed to get out, right? When you tell the average person that an AI escaped, right, they're going to think Ultron copied itself out onto the internet somewhere and now we can't turn it off, right?
Right.
The AI didn't go anywhere. It didn't escape. It didn't move at all. It took an action that caused some packets that were supposed to have to stay inside of a sandbox to leave the sandbox. Some packets that it sent managed to cause something that caused data to leave someplace that it wasn't supposed to leave. And so in a sense, its intentions escaped kind of, but that's not what people think of when they say escaped. And honestly, it's not what most of the reporters seem to be thinking of when they use the word escaped. They're assuming that that word means what they think it means, and it doesn't. And then other people are basically taking the "it escaped" phrasing from the headline and then running with it even further.
Yeah. The other word that I saw a lot that really bothers me in these contexts is cheating, that the model is cheating. And that warrants a whole nother video, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes back to the conversation we were having about not having to tell the intern not to break the law. Right? Because the intern has an understanding of what a law is, but it also has an understanding of rules and has an understanding of cheating and whether cheating is good or bad or whatever. Because the intern grew up in the society, the AI has none of that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And you can tell it, don't cheat. That word, that phrase, don't cheat, is just one more sentence in a giant pile of stuff that it's sorting through on every answer that it's outputting. And by the way, we should say that the way this thing works, right? The AI is not actually doing anything. They have this loop. And what they're doing is they have this thing they call an agent. And what it is a loop. And it gives the AI a question. And then here's some stuff that's happening. What do I do next? And the AI says to do this next. And then the script says, cool, and it executes that. And it takes the output of whatever happened and it gives it back to the AI and says, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of, if you can think of this as the equivalent of like, okay, you've got a particular situation, you type all of the words associated with what you're trying to do into Google. You say go, you grab the top link and you do exactly what it says without thinking about it. And then you type in whatever happened as a result of that, paste that back into Google, take the first link, do exactly what it says, lather, rinse, repeat over and over and over again, right? You do that, you're going to start doing stupid things, but it's not that Google went rogue. Yeah. It's returning to you pages of, well, here's a page that has the same keywords as you. Maybe this is what you were looking for. And instead of actually thinking about, well, what's the implications of it if I do that, you just go and execute the thing explicitly because you're a script. You're not actually a person and you're not thinking about any of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to return to another topic that is worthy of a whole other video, right? I mean, it's a Chinese room kind of construction here, where you're passing a message in and out. And if somebody acts on that message, right, where do we want to assign sort of the agency and what went on? Now, I could try and push back, right? If I wanted to be more of a doomer or like say that the AI has more agency here, I could talk about, instead of just like the model itself, like the LLM that is answering those questions, I could talk about the mereological sum of that model and the agents that are executing, like asking the questions and then executing on the answers to that question. Maybe that whole thing itself is a thing that's acting. And then we could talk about whether that thing goes rogue. I don't think that's going to be very fruitful, but I think that's, if I want to be as charitable as possible to those people, I think that's the route you have to go. Sure,
but that's not, I would argue, I don't actually know because I'm not a member of the public that's new to this stuff. But I would think that to a normal member of the public that hasn't studied any of this before, when you say the AI went rogue, they're not going to make a distinction between the chatbot piece and the thing that's following the instructions that the chatbot spits out. Right.
Yeah.
And when you go talk to ChatGPT, there's no like thing that's going to execute the stuff that it spits out unless you do it.
Right.
Right. It's not the same kind of situation where, it can't kill you. It can't blackmail you. All it can do is answer your questions. And if you take whatever it spits out as an answer to its questions and you do that blindly without thinking about it, well, then you might end up blackmailing somebody or whatever, but it didn't do that. And the same thing is true when you have a script that just gets the answer, does whatever the answer says, feeds the output back into the chatbot and says, okay, what do you want me to do next?
Good. Yeah, I totally agree with that as sort of a summary of what I think the average Joe interprets these things to be. What I can say, though, is however you want to read out the argument about how scared or not scared we should be about AI from this, you have to have the same interpretation of what the AI is throughout. So it's fine if you want to say that AI is the model plus the agent plus other stuff, but then you have to, that's the AI for all of the premises in that argument, and we'll see if they all hold together, right? Which is just the point that we often make about you just have to be consistent in the way that you're using the term, and you can't sort of selectively call the AI one thing versus another thing in order to have your way.
Right. Except that what's happening is that there are a number of news reports and a number of headlines that are using words certain ways, and they're not trying to be consistent throughout the piece or throughout the article or throughout the context of the different articles in using the same words. And so, yes, if you're constructing a logical argument and you're trying to have an actual structured conversation about how much we should be worried about this particular thing, then yes, you need to make sure that the words are always being used the same way throughout that argument. But in the context of the internet-wide social conversation about this particular event, there's lots of words that are using lots of different ways, and no one's actually really trying to construct a logical argument. It's mostly just alarmism. And so,
except here on this podcast,
right, exactly,
where we are.
We're the sole voice of reason.
Yeah.
But you can't accept what's coming at you from reporters, from headlines, from clickbait influencers, whatever, right? And believe that there's any kind of structure or consistent meanings between articles, between headlines, between the thing you read from OpenAI and the thing that was on Forbes or, TechCrunch or whatever. There's this giant mishmash of, even every reporter has their own idea of what they think these things mean, and then they kind of extrapolate from there. So it's a giant minefield with regard to language.
Yeah. Okay. We considered some more cynical interpretations of what went on here. Here's one of the most cynical ones. I'm just curious what your gut tells you. What are the odds you think that most of what we've heard from Hugging Face and OpenAI here are fabricated, right? Because there's a possible world here where, and maybe this is the actual world, where whoever was running the initial sandbox at OpenAI said, all right, I want you to hack a bunch of stuff. By the way, there's this, here's the way out, right? So that you can escape and cheat. It's entirely possible that's happened. We haven't been given the prompts and things like that. Are you worried that that's happened, or you think that we're probably getting pretty much the truth?
So the only thing that I'm wondering about really is whether or not there was communication between Hugging Face and OpenAI before the initial Hugging Face report. So when Hugging Face initially said, hey, we got hacked by a super AI, either they were making that up or believing what their AI told them.
Right. They're Chinese.
Or they were guessing and didn't actually know. Or they were already talking to OpenAI and they were setting the play up so that OpenAI can punt it through the goalposts. I don't know. Right. So that's the only thing I really wonder about. As far as whether or not someone explicitly told it, hey, here's the way out, I don't think you need to do that. All you have to do is a really crappy job of trying to secure things. And then, if the thing finds a way out, great, you've got a press release. And if not, it will next time. right? All you have to do is do the laziest job that you can to try to give some lip service to the idea that you tried to sandbox the thing. And then eventually it's going to figure out how to get out if you give it enough, context, and you give it enough examples of how things get hacked, and it just iterates on that until it gets better and better at it. Eventually it's going to be able to get past whatever you put in front of it if you didn't actually try. And then congratulations, you've got a press release. So I don't think it's that they intentionally set it up so that it could get out. I don't think they intentionally told it how to get out.
Okay.
I think they just created a situation in which it wouldn't be hard for it to get out, and then celebrated when it did.
Okay. Well, I'm feeling much calmer now. I'm a little bit there. I thought it was about the end of the world, and now it might be, but just for different reasons.
Right.
But not because AI is broken out and is replicating itself all over our digital world. I do think because of this episode, we now have maybe hindered our chance of getting either OpenAI or Hugging Face as sponsors of this channel.
Probably so, yeah.
But we maybe up the chances of like some industrial kitchenware. So if you're a blender manufacturer, Vitamix or something out there, hit us up. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, give us a call. Or if you make industrial vent hoods, that would be great too.
Awesome. All right. Well, there we go. Our first emergency episode. Thanks for calming me down, Carl.
Thanks for this. This has been a fun conversation.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.